This is a problem that some people have. You can criticize something despite not being an expert. You can look at that review and see that it is wrong. Ouch. Anime News Network has taken a massive, massive L after posting a review for my Pancreas Broke, But My Life Got Better manga. And my gosh, there's one of those things where I see something kind of blow up on the internet, and in most cases I either don't really feel equipped to really kind of speak on it, it's too much in the realm of drama, or it's just something that I think too many people are already talking about. There's too much controversy behind it, and so I don't really feel like I'm going to add anything to it. I mean, there's a whole situation with the AI translation thing going on right now that I kind of want to talk about, but I keep debating if I even want to speak on it because I think there's way too much, the emotions are way too high. And I think at that point, you're just kind of adding fuel to the fire, which, yes, probably does very well for algorithms and getting up on clicks and whatnot, but sometimes I just don't really feel like feeding into it. But this particular controversy kind of spoke to me a bit. And that, again, like I said, is this review that was posted on Anime News Network. It was done by Kevin Cormick. And in the review itself, they, like ANN likes to do, Anime News Network, no matter, if you're writing for Anime News Network, if you're part of the staff, whatever. If you're a part of Anime News Network, you have to know that every time you write about something, you have to qualify yourself at some point. You have to put the qualifiers in there. I'm actually very proficient in this, or here's the reason why I'm so smart about this. But yes, they claimed they were a doctor speaking about a manga that is obviously about. It's an autobiography. For those who don't know, Nagata Kabi, pretty much all their works has been an autobiography. They speak about themselves, their experiences and things. And I mean, obviously the one that was most popular was my lesbian experience with loneliness, which I think was probably their biggest one. I admit, see, I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to unqualify myself. I'm not like the biggest knowledge base of this particular writer, but I know their stuff is very popular. And I think a lot of the popularity comes in relatability. People see themselves in the writer, or they just want to kind of support their writing because it seems like it is a way that they are finding to help themselves write about it. And it's something that people are obviously resonating to because they're very popular. But in doing so, obviously, they are pretty much airing themselves out. They are showing their flaws, and their flaws is a lot in mental illness and the issues they're facing. And this doctor is speaking on authority saying, I know about this stuff, and this is I'll give you guys the actual quote. I don't want to sit here and just kind of blab on what they're saying and not really tell you what they're saying. This review has been taken down, by the way. I guess, credits to Anime News Network. They did what everybody told them. If you look online, there is massive amounts of people saying, take this thing down. What the hell are you doing? This thing is terrible. Who let this through? That's the massive question mark is, who the hell allowed this? Which I'll get into their actual response later on. In their review, they state, part of my frustration comes from my professional background. I'm a working medical doctor with wide experience in multiple fields of medicine, including child development and psychiatry. I'm also a father of 3 children, all with varying degrees of neurodivergence, ADHD, autism. I have plenty of patients on my books with stories similar to Kabi's, many of whom I'm still actively trying to help. I'm not sure if Kabi uses her manga as some kind of therapy, but I'm not convinced it's working for her. Sure, it provides her with an income, but I worry about the psychological costs. She already records how much she worries her manga impacts her mother. The first couple of volumes made her cry. Again, that little qualifier in there. I do things with children and psychiatry. Let's get into the review so people get in a bigger context here. Let's just break it down. Nagata Kabi's work isn't for everyone. I made the mistake of lending an earlier volume of her work to my younger sister, a driven, ambitious, organized, type A personality, an engineer who self-admittedly lacks empathy. She hated it, accusing Kabi of trivializing life's struggles, being immature with arrested development, and painfully self-obsessed. I can't say I completely disagree with her assessment. However, my views on Kabi's sometimes difficult work are a little more nuanced. Great, Roy. This is where it gets in that realm of, how did this pass editorials? How did this get past the cutting floor to go be posted? For those who don't know, yes, typically with these big blog sites, you're going to submit what you wrote to somebody. They're going to critique it, look through it, make sure nothing looks bad in it, and then, yes, it goes to being published. It's not like this guy hit post and it goes up. This had to go through somebody, and they read that and said, that doesn't sound bad at all. What is this manga about? Oh, yeah, it's an autobiography of somebody that has struggling with mental illnesses and difficulties. Yeah, I think somebody saying that they hate it, accusing them of trivializing life struggles, being immature and arrested. Like, who said this is okay? If that's bad enough. That's the first paragraph, by the way. I mean, yes, there's something before this, but this is where the review starts. With confessional autobiography stories like this, it's almost impossible to separate the author from the product. That is extremely true. So that any criticism can feel like an attack on the authors themselves. I do want to avoid that. However, publishing and selling life experiences isn't free of criticism. You know, this goes back to the old saying, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all. I understand this is a life story, but it can be criticized. And again, it's hard to say, I can agree with that. It's not a bad it's not an incorrect statement, but it is a morally bad statement. Does that sound right? Does that sound right? This is the latest volume in a series that began back in 2016 with the breakout hit My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, Kabi's memoirs of her struggles with loneliness as a mentally ill queer woman in her 20s. In it, she attempts unsuccessfully to deal with her physical desires in experience. I'm gonna warp some stuff here for YouTube. And desires for human contact by contracting the services of several women at a female-only escort agency. Kabi follows up her unexpected success with a 2-volume My Solo Exchange Diary, then My Alcoholic Escape from Reality, My Wandering Warrior Experience, and the recent short ebook only My Wandering Warrior Eating Disorder. Again, this is an author that airs out their difficulties, and that's obviously indicated by the titles. Kabi is the only child produced by her parents' at time fraught arranged marriage, and her world has always seemed incredibly small, focused entirely around her internal mental struggles, her strained relationship with her parents, her centenarian grandmother, and a handful of friends. This narrow focus sometimes feels hopelessly constricted, like she should get out and see some of the world, walk some steps in other shoes. Unfortunately, Kabi struggles not only with functioning in modern society, but also to comprehend her feelings and those of others. Although she describes the diagnosis and medical treatment for anxiety, depression, ADHD, eating disorders, alcoholism, and subsequent pancreatitis, I can't help but wonder if she's also even further neurodivergent and is perhaps somewhere on the autistic spectrum. Kabi's obvious emotional immaturity and repetitive self-sabotage would be understandable in a young person in her late teens or early 20s. But My Pancreas Broke finds her a woman of 33, making the same mistakes and same very poor decisions. It's frustrating for me as a reader. I can't imagine what it's like to be her long-suffering and out-of-their-depth parents. This is where I can't really defend this writer at all. Because again, this is where it goes into the realm of, I'm talking about what I'm seeing when I'm reading this. And the author is acknowledging what the struggle is, but they're right here trying to diagnose the person and thus putting labels on them in a way that it makes sense. And this is why I said earlier, whenever I see this kind of stuff in writing and whatnot, I observe it and I see what it is, but I don't try to label it or try to say I understand fully what's going on. It hurts more in the idea that this person is literally saying, man, I can't imagine what it's like for their parents dealing with this. It's, again, acknowledging the damage, but it's almost, and this is, I completely agree when I seen this comment earlier today, this is where it gets in that realm of almost finger shaking. This is a self-claimed doctor finger shaking at them. How dare you? You're self-sabotage. Well, you're in your 30s. It's literally saying grow up. And it's like, are you missing the point here? And yes, it goes in the realms of kind of going, and you say you're a doctor, and this is, do you normally talk like this to your patients? Or you don't try to figure out what they're doing? Instead, you just kind of talk down at them? And I do understand there's some cases, and again, I won't claim this is for everybody. I do understand there's some cases where sometimes there is a fix in just having some sort of stability to tell you what direction to go in. I mean, that's what kind of doctor this person is, but I don't know if that necessarily works for everybody. this is where he gets into the part of the frustrations, their professional background. They are so knowledgeable in all this stuff, have plenty of experience with people like Kabi, apparently, and apparently he fixed him. Apparently Kabi's doctor's not doing very good. It's like she's learned nothing from her previous experiences. And even when her family and medical staff do their best to help her, she insists on running away from the hospital. Every time she did this, I wanted to scream. At one point, her doctor advises her to hang around for half an hour to join a group to meet other people suffering from alcoholism-induced diseases. Great, I thought. That's exactly what Kabi needs to get her out of her spiraling, self-destructive thoughts. But she ran away, and my hope was dashed. That's sort of the point. This is one of those things that I keep running into with a lot of reviews on this particular site, but a lot of reviews elsewhere as well, and it's mostly in the realm of Western media reviewers and whatnot that I think have less of a patience in things going the way that they want it to go. And it's always that kind of statement where they go, this should have done it this way, and thus I don't like it. And it's like here as well, again, acknowledging the idea that this is an autobiography. It's this idea of like, well, I seen this, and I thought that would be great. Yeah, and I think everybody that read it wanted that. They think, yes, that makes sense, that'll fix it. But in actuality, what actually happens is something different. It's the rug pull. And yes, it is the unexpectedness of somebody else's mental state. You as a doctor thinking this is your path of victory, the patient, it's not their path of victory. It is a massive amount of fear, and they run away from it. Again, the frustration there makes sense, but the way you're portraying it is not. It doesn't make sense. Because again, this is the story they're telling, for one, the story they've gone through, or at least maybe possibly experienced, but additionally the idea of they're not you, and you're never going to understand them. As much as you want to claim you're a doctor and say you're a doctor, and yes, maybe you are a doctor, you're not going to understand them. And I would hope that somebody that deals with this kind of stuff would know that they don't understand it, and they're never going to understand it. And that's why it is a disorder. That is why it's difficult to manage. That's why people need to seek out doctors and help for it, because it's hard to manage. What's especially frustrating is that Kabi knows what she needs to do to get better, but lacks the courage or conviction to do so, where it mostly all kind of stems from, right? That's not a mental disorder. She doesn't seem to want help. And I worry that she'll continue to write depressingly frustrating memoirs full of one step forward, two steps back, lack of progress, until she inevitably dies from a self-inflicted damage. I would understand if this is like their actual doctor speaking to them. I would understand if this is a support group that has gained trust in her and understands where this is going. But that is a massive, and I didn't want to do this. I fully agree with people's outrage. That is some massively, lack of empathy is just swelling from that. And it's extremely saddening. And again, I sort of agree with them in the idea that, yes, there's some times when you read something like this and you are connected to them or you want the best for them, you're going to inside want to be screaming, I want you to get help, otherwise you're going to destroy yourself. But that is a terrible way of wording it. I feel bad for her, but I'm not sure I can take much more of her self-defeating, self-mutilating, self-destructive, self-sabotage. Then stop reading it. Now, I can understand these statements right here if there is a proof and somebody is on the outside, or not on the outside, on the inside, watching this go through, and it seems as if this is causing it. But that is a very dumb statement to make in lieu of not knowing that. But yes, it's fine to be upset at the idea of watching that self-damage. She reminds me of No Longer Human's Oba Yozo, and any student of Japanese literature should know how it worked out for both the author and the character. This is probably the biggest oof, and I really don't like to draw intent here, but this is probably the biggest oof of this entire review, for me personally, is this idea of, I see this self-destruction happening within this manga. And over here, I'm going to equate that to a story that is about self-ending and eventually being successful at it. And it's like, I don't have to explain that. That is stupid. There's always glimmers of hopes when it comes to future. However, Kabi manages to achieve sobriety once again, and I hope that she maintains it this time. She's an entertaining narrator and often startling, insightful. Once she finally comprehends something that seems obvious or second nature to the rest of us, the breakdown of her cognitive process is always fascinating. I'm not sure where she is heading on her rocky journey of poor mental and physical health, but I wish Kabi the best. While you equate her to a story about self-ending. Right. Yes, ANN eventually posted discussing this review with Lindsay, blah, blah, the editor. We decided to remove the review from ANN. I'm not qualified to comment on any of the issues relating mental health. You don't have to qualify that. Again, stop qualifying things, Anime News Network. I'm not going to qualify myself and say that I know about this stuff, so I'm not going to talk about it. But we've come to a decision that basically what they're saying is that they're not going to say that he's wrong because we're not doctors. You can... This is the problem that some people have. You can criticize something despite not being an expert. You can look at that review and see that it is wrong. But again, that's my mentality from a perspective of somebody that has dealt with people with mental issues for a long time and brain disorders and effects on the brain. I can say that I'm not an expert, but I know what's right and wrong when you're talking about it. Their point of view from ANN, anyways, from this whole thing is that they see that it was hurtful. Unnecessarily hurtful. But you're not an expert for this, so how can you say that it was unnecessarily hurtful? And he's a doctor. He's qualified to talk about how he talks about these people, so how can he say that? You're talking on authority. Stop acting like you're trying to cover your tracks here. But yeah, they decided to remove the review. They're going to discuss ways to prevent it in the future. Anyways, that is this big L from ANN. There's a difficulty here, and this is going to pretty much be my bigger thing I'm going to be talking about here is this stuff worries me because in the grander scheme of this whole controversy around this particular review, it bothers me most because I agree with a lot of people here that this is essentially a doctor, a claimed doctor, which I think some people have already confirmed this, and I already don't like the idea that people are looking into this person and trying to track them down and yelling, you know, go K yourself. What this sort of highlights to me is this disconnect that I think all around people have with mental illness, talking about mental illness, airing out your mental illness to people, telling stories about mental illness, consuming media that has aspects of mental illness, finding connections with people and relatability with people because of their stories of mental illness, finding that comfort in seeing that, looking into media where people psychoanalyze people professionally, and this idea of, yes, reviewing media that is about mental illness and sometimes the criticisms that can come from that. I've obviously been covering anime for a long, long time. I'm qualifying myself. I'm sorry, I'm doing it. I'm doing exactly what ANN does. But it gets to a point. I've been covering anime for a long time, and the thing that I have experienced several times over and over again is where I am watching or consuming some sort of anime or manga, whatever, and I'm talking about the subject within it that is technically covering something dark or something that is essentially about mental illness. And I speak about it or I label it and then I get criticized for that. One easy example is when I reviewed on our podcast, March Comes In Like a Lion. Fantastic series, by the way. Please go watch it. And in that, I talked about the fact that, yes, you have this character who is in a massive state of depression. He's in a dark, dark place. And then he finds this comfort. He's finding his way out of it. It's a pinnacle part of the story is this guy who's in a very dark place and he finds warmth. He finds the light and he's coming out of it. And I very quickly got a criticism through a private message that said, you don't know what depression is. He doesn't have depression. You don't get over depression. And my mind immediately went to this idea of, okay, they're saying this on a state of authority. They're turning around and saying, I have depression, and thus he does not because the story is saying that he gets over this. Which I don't think necessarily, at least as much as I've watched with the anime, at least what's adapted, I don't think he's fully over it. But the point here is, I quickly over time realized that there is this bigger picture around covering the media and responding to the media and overall relatability, understanding, and whatnot. The conclusion that I have drawn through my many years of covering this medium and many years of dealing with people that have some sort of mental illness or disorder. I talked about this several times in my coverage of Mushoku Tensei, the novel series. Multiple sclerosis, dementia, Alzheimer's. so many different things that affect the mind. Through my many hours of talking to doctors that specialize on the brain itself, a lot of people don't understand a damn thing about the brain. That's the conclusion that I have come to. And I know that it sounds like a defeatist mentality, but it is truth. The brain, the mind, the mental state of people, what people go through, disorders, the status of people, what they're going through, their depression, emotional, whatnot, whatever you call it. If it involves the brain, we as people don't understand a damn thing about it. That's why people that are, surgeons of the brain and whatnot get paid a lot of money, because it's a very complex device and we're still trying to figure it out. And what I've found through talking to all these doctors is a lot of them talk about it differently. I've run into doctors that actually can lay things out in a way that it makes perfect sense to me. Say a scarring of the brain itself and showing how, okay, this area covers this area covers this, and oh yeah, by the way, I can observe it. But in most cases, it's very difficult to understand. And so when I look at a situation like this, my immediate response in my mind goes to, and it's the same response that I have with this person criticizing me for calling something depression when they don't think it's depression, is that every illness, every state, every emotion, everything that involves the brain, nobody understands it. And what I mean by that really primarily is that nobody understands it but the person going through it. And I've come to understand that. I've come to accept that. And so whenever I deal with anything involving the mental state of a character or the mental state of a person, an autobiography, an account, I don't question what they're doing. I don't question what they're saying. Yes, I talk about the situation and I give my perspective of the situation, but in the end of the day, I can't say that I understand the person. I will never understand the person. I can relate to aspects of what they're going through and I can talk about what they're going through, but I can't say I know what they're going through. And I can't say that when somebody else reviews something, I can say that I understand what they're going through and they understand what's going on with that. About the only thing I can do is say that you don't fully understand it. And so that's where I come to in response to this whole situation where you have this doctor, which yes, I can agree with a lot of people when you're reading this review. It sounds like he's talking down his nose at this person. And it's kind of scary when you think about you're supposed to be a doctor and you're apparently including that psychiatry, and you're talking in a way that almost sounds like you're in the room with the person. It's almost like there's one of those things where it's like, I kind of understand what he's saying here, but at the same time, I can't agree with how he's saying it because he's not in a state of authority to be guiding this person. So it almost sounds like an outsider who's standing outside of the hospital room or the doctor's office, and when they come out the door, they say, "You're not doing good enough," and then walk away. Because they're not dealing with the situation. They don't know what the plan of action is. And so it is kind of troubling. And so I agree with a lot of people, but at the same time, I sort of understand what this guy's going through because yes, it's a hard topic to talk about. But at the same time, does the reviewer expect that this autobiography is going to have this person write it in a way that it's not repetitive and lie to themselves that it didn't happen over and over again? It doesn't make any sense, right? If I'm writing a diary, would I say that I didn't do something that I did that day? Just because I think that somebody will read it and think, man, that sounds pretty repetitive. No, I'm going to write what I'm going through because that is part of the whole point of it. On the opposite end, I understand people would be upset about this because I think a lot of people relate to what she's going through, relate to the difficulties that they're facing, and relate to this idea that, yes, in a lot of cases with this kind of stuff, you're going to not be able to get yourself out of that situation. A lot of situations like this don't fix overnight. It's a long, long process. And some of the issues that I've dealt with personally with relatives, it's a multiple year process and probably going to end up being an entire lifetime process. That's the difficulty that they face there. That's the bigger problem with the whole situation. Anyways, yeah, they removed it. Massive L for Anon and this writer. I will have to say, people stop trying to chase this person down. It is so crazy seeing in the quotes and stuff, people are literally trying to find this person. They're physically trying to find this person. And it's just, it's too much. But at the same time, it was a stupid review. Let's just face it, it was a stupid review. So anyways, yeah, like I said before, I hate this kind of stuff. I hate even talking about this kind of stuff just because of my experiences with this stuff. And for both perspectives, from the reviewer, from the writer, from the outsiders looking at the review, I see all these perspectives, and it's one of those aspects of like, it's so hard to say anything. It is so hard to say you know. It is so hard to say you understand, and it's so hard to say you can allow somebody to criticize something that is a publication that is technically being sold. There is kind of a side of me that believes that things like this, autobiographies and stuff like this, where it is a personal experience, it kind of goes in that realm of like, I don't necessarily wonder if you can review it, because it is something that is written in a way that is supposed to be true. So again, how can you say that there is errors in the writing when it's how it plays out? But it does kind of hurt in the idea that there is a sense, there is like this mixture of empathy and lack of empathy in there. And that's the part that kind of scares me as somebody claiming to be a doctor. So anyhow, that's my thoughts on this whole fiasco. Let me know what you think down in the comments down below. Hit that like button if you like this video. Additionally, if you like this content and you want to support the channel more, I have a Patreon link, tips link, super thanks, membership button down below. Greatly appreciate everybody does, and y'all take care. And yes, take care of yourself.